we will go through some use cases, some things we've seen in the wild, as it so, like, one of the key things we talked about, SIEM keeps logs. Like, a and you might be going, "Yeah, okay, so what does that matter?" But, like, threat actors and I don't know if you've seen this in any of the incidents you've dealt with, Chris, where they will go and clear the logs, right?
Yep.
Like, they are so alright, this was my, Gemini generated AI of, Hansel and Gretel in the woods, um, but, like, what did Hansel do to try and defeat his wicked stepmother, lead him into the forest, right? He dropped breadcrumbs, and I would say Hansel and Gretel didn't have a SIM because the breadcrumbs got eaten by the crows. Like, there's my analogy here. Um, and that is what we see happen, like, we'll get an EDR detection, and we had one yesterday where our SOC team was like, we could see the threat actor doing bad things, we could isolate it, but we couldn't tell you how they got into the environment, we couldn't give you more information, we could just say, "Bad thing happened," because the threat actor was like, "Yeah, I'm going to go clear the event logs as soon as I land." Um and that impacts how quickly you can get that person up and running, right, Chris? At that point.
Right.
Oh,
Yeah, I remember at a conference I was at recently where there's a, "Yeah, make sure you build a custom alert that, lets you know if anybody's clearing PowerShell logs." And I said, "That's great, and I'm glad we have that alert available to us, but isn't that a bit closing the closing the barn?" What is I'm not
yeah,
Canadian. Closing
exactly.
the barn door after the horses already got out, right?
Yeah, exactly. Because 'cause you're like, "Oh, super." Um, and, I've seen instances, though, where, because and most SIMs are this way, where they are sending those logs offsite so the threat actor isn't able to access them in some way. Um And that's how our SIM it grabs the logs locally, sends them off-site. Our SOC can review those logs, and if they have SIM there and we had a large resort, uh, location that somebody deployed us with EDR and SIM into, and there was a threat actor actively in that environment. They didn't realize it at the time. The threat actor was clearing the logs to hide where they were, but with SIM, our SOC was able to pivot over to those logs and say, "Oh, this is the address the threat actor is coming from," and we're able to identify a machine that this was you've probably been to resorts, Chris, where, there are large complexes and computers get put in all sorts of weird places, and somebody put a
Yep.
computer in a, a reception area someplace that nobody had thought about, and that's where the threat actor had landed, and with SIM, we were able to say, "Hey, there's this machine called" I can't remember what it was called, but, XYZ, do you have that on the network? And they were able to talk to the client and be like, "Oh, yeah, that's over, in maintenance."
Oh,
And,
no.
but SIM gave us that visibility. Otherwise, we would not have been able to say where the threat actor was coming from. So it's key on that. I mean, it's also key to involve your MSP, like Choice Solutions, early and help them in deployments and all sorts of things. Don't go buy a computer and throw it all in and be like, "Hey, it's good," right? Um, we could have a whole conversation, I'm sure, about
Surprise.
yes, exactly, surprise. Alright. So, let's move on, though. So, like, how about SIM with the SOC and EDR? Well, that becomes this really strong story of success. So we had an incident where one of our partners protected a doggy daycare center out in the Bay Area. And they had deployed EDR and SIM. And so what happened through that is that the threat actor, they compromised an administrator account via the VPN. So virtual private
Mm.
network. You know, I, Chris, did you deploy any of these during 2020 for some reason? Did something happen where you had to suddenly put out VPNs like candy?
We saw a lot of that going out, and now we spent the last, I don't know, 4 or 5 years playing a lot of whack-a-mole, to plug up some of those tunnels that we set up in 2020.
Exactly. Like I deployed a ton of this when I was on the MSP space because I was trying to get sonic wall VPNs out all the time. And now playing whack-a-mole, the threat actors have realized, oh, these are a nice juicy target, if you will, that they could come in. So this is one where they compromised an administrator account and logged in. Well, what happened on our side, we had SIM, so our SOC team was able to start to look. They're like, "Oh, well, that's interesting. We got reliablesite.net, fan favorite of your cyber criminals have, logged into this network." Um, and we were able to start to say, "Oh, yeah, they're actually trying to get in regularly." So, SIM gives us that alert. We could see it. Then we could see that they started with that administrator account, but they pivoted to another account, AMR Ganister, as the user who did remote desktop onto a domain controller, right? And so that's not good, but one of the things that Huntress has developed are these detections around known bad host names.
Right.
Threat actors, surprisingly, are don't always change their tactics. And so, like, this particular machine name, we had seen previously in other, partners' environments, and so we were able to detect, like, "Hey, that's weird, that machine has come back in," and that gave us another usage of SIM, right? It becomes this other tripwire, if you will, um, thinking about it. And so EDR, we were able to pivot. This is the power of endpoint detection and response. You can start to see what users do, so they were accessing files, they were enumerating the network, and then we saw them grabbing files, right? WinRAR, which is a file thing, they were trying to get scans, managers, company web, right? These are HR, right? All things that are scary, right? Because they were trying to snoop around. And when we saw all of this with the SIM alert, we were able to say, nope, we're isolating this whole thing. And somehow I'm supposed to have the wolf be the bad guy in this one, but the wolf seems happy. I don't know, in my ChatGPT generated image,
I think
but
they get a bad name. They get a bad
it's
name.
they got a bad name. But it becomes this combination where you can, you know, all together get a you get a detection, you can start to move, and our team can do this whole isolation so that nobody is coming in at all. Because that administrator account, had we just isolated that one machine, that one domain controller, threat actor could have still come in through that VPN. But we were able to say, no, we can see in SIM where they are coming through, and we were able to lock them down from there. Um, Anything you want to share around here, or just that maybe about people who talk to you about that they're too small to get attacked?
Oh, that's my favorite line is, "We're too small." We don't need to do that. And then and unfortunately, and we do temper our response because we do love our clients and our prospects, and it's not that you're too small, you're just too small for a click or a headline. Um, Small and medium-sized businesses tend to be easy targets, just because, there are resource constraints. There are this kind of that thinking of, well, we're too small. If we just security by obscurity type of deal. If I just hide among the big dogs, they won't come after me. But what we're seeing is that the value of the data in some of these small firms. So think medical practices, financial advisors, um, grocery and retail that don't necessarily maybe don't consider themselves a crown jewels, but at the same time, there's stuff that's important to your organization and your customers that these threat actors still want access to, regardless of your size or your impact there.
Yeah, and that doggy daycare could totally have been somebody who thought, "Oh, I wasn't small enough," but thankfully their provider was like, "No, you do have things of value. You have W-2s, you have clients,
Right.
you have payroll, all of these types of things that are there."